So today we're gonna go through an intro to Windows. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Windows, not all of you because of FCPS on laptops and everything. But with today's lecture, we're gonna go into more like GUI stuff and like firewall, that kind of stuff, more behind the scenes. So let's start with GUI. So for Cyber Patriot, most of the settings you can change through control panel or the actual settings place. So in your VM, I'm going to demonstrate on a Windows Server VM today. It's pretty similar to Windows 10, but some of the commands might be different, so be aware of that. But so you can, let me pull up control panel. So in control panel, you have a lot of your settings here, so you can change user accounts. So in Cyber Patriot, they usually give you like a list of users that are authorized and their account types. And then also, on your user account page, there would be unauthorized users. So you would have to get rid of the unauthorized users and change permissions if someone's like an admin or like a general user or something. So you would do this through the user accounts place, and then you can go into manage another account. And then here, if you have several users, they'll all show up here. You can add a user account and so on. So control panel is very helpful with things like that. You can also use system and security and some other stuff I'll mention later in the lecture. So moving on. So a very helpful thing is the run menu. So you can access it by going into, so click your Windows key and the R key, and then that should bring up your run menu. And then there are 4 pretty convenient shortcuts. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the local user and group management. So the shortcut for this is lusrmgr.msc. And then that will bring up, give it a second. So it'll bring up the users and groups like before. So if you don't want to go into your control panel and look through all those, this is another option. So the local user and group management is basically a console for managing local users and groups in Windows. The basic purpose of local user management is to assign the rights to different users and groups on a computer. So for example, the different roles include admin, standard user, guest, and so on. Next, let's talk about the group policy editor. And the command for this is gpedit.msc. So this is your group policy editor. It's a configuration manager for Windows, which it makes it a lot easier to configure your Windows settings. So instead of going through the Windows registry, which I'll talk about later on, you can configure different aspects of the Windows OS through this. So here you can see you have your user, wrong thing, 1 second. So you can see you have all your different settings, you have your software settings, Windows, admin, and then you also have your user config right here. Next, we have setcall.msc. You might use this a lot, especially at the beginning of the competition. So this is your security policy editor. So this is another way to edit your various policies. So for example, or actually you can get a lot of easy points using this because one of the ways to earn points is by changing password policies and audit policies. So you can go into account policies and then password policy. And then in here, you can change your password age to whatever. I don't have the exact numbers at the top of my head right now, but there are specific days that Cyber Patriot wants for you to get the points. So you can do stuff through here. And so in the competition, make sure that this is one of the first things you do because it doesn't take too long to do. And once again, you can get easy points from it. And then the last shortcut I want to demonstrate is the task scheduler. Just task schd.msc. So in here, you can create and run almost any task automatically. So you can start applications, run commands, and execute scripts at like a particular day and time, or you can trigger tasks when a specific event occurs. So those are an overview of the main MSc shortcuts that you would find useful. Let me pull up let me see if you guys have any questions. Okay, so next we're gonna talk about the firewall. So as many of you might know, the Windows Firewall is a security application that was created by Microsoft, and it was built into Windows. So it's designed to filter network data transmissions to and from your Windows system and block harmful communications or programs that are initiating them. So when it comes to securing your device, it is very, very helpful to have your firewall turned on. And you can find the firewall settings by going into your control panel, and then you can go to System and Security, and then Windows Defender Firewall. Another way to do this is just going into your search bar and searching Windows Defender Firewall, and it should show up. So through here, you can enable or disable your firewall settings. Usually you want to keep them on because you want to block out all of those intruders. And there's another section of this, so you can go to Advanced Settings, and it'll take you to a place where you can see inbound and outbound. So in Cyber Patriot, if you're not really if you feel like you got a lot of the issues, if you resolve them, you might not have actually done so, because if you look through inbound and outbound, there might be some type of weird service that you have to get rid of. And so you can just look through these, see if there's anything that has a weird name. There's a list of services that might be harming your laptop or server, and I can share that with you in a little bit. But that's mainly how the firewall works and what you should do with your firewall settings. So moving on to Windows Registry. So your registry contains information used by Windows and your programs. So it helps your operating system manage the computer. It helps programs use the computer's resources. And it provides a location for keeping custom settings you make in both Windows and your programs. So basically it's like the back end for all the policies, and you can see what tasks have gone on through this. Let me pull up the registry. So the easiest way to do this is by going into your search bar and searching for registry, and it's called Registry Editor. So as you can see, there are 5 main components of this. They look a little bit weird, the names, so I can go through what each of them do. So the HK class is root. That is used to store, that is information used by programs for file association and for sharing your information. The next one, current user, is used for settings and configuration for your current user. Local machine stores your settings specific to the local computer. And then users is similar to current users, but it stores your settings and configuration for all the users on the computer. And then the information in your current user key, this one, is copied from here when the user logs in. So it's basically the overall user place. And lastly, we have current configuration, which stores your hardware information, anything about your PC, its resources, any of that kind of hardware stuff. So registry, you won't really do much with it, but you can come here just to see what tasks are going on, just back end, just to see if you need to worry about anything. Moving on, let's go to Windows updates. So updates are once again, another very, very easy way to earn points in your competition. Cyber Patriot always makes sure that you want to have your computer updated to the newest version because updates can take care of like security problems, bugs, and any of that kind of stuff. But sometimes updates take a pretty long time. So what you want to do is like one of the first steps of the competition, you want to go into your Windows updates and just start running your updates. It'll usually take a little bit, but it helps. So updates, you probably know where they are, but I can show it to you again just in case. So let me go to settings. And then if you scroll down, there's update and security. Oops, wrong thing. And then there's Windows Update. And then as you can see, there's an error on here, probably from setting up the VM, but usually there would be like an update button here and you would just click it and it'll do its thing. So once again, this should be your first step. You can do other stuff while you're doing the updates. It'll just run in the background. It won't really interfere with any of your current like tasks or anything. And easy points, so make sure you do it. Next, let's talk about the command prompt. So I'm gonna show you guys some of the basic commands that you can do with this. So command prompt, you can either search up command prompt and it'll show up, or like a little shortcut is to search up cmd because the file name for command prompt is cmd.exe. So first let's talk about cd. So cd lets you change directories and you can go down one level or up one level. Right now you can see we're in C users and administrator. I'm going to use the cd command and then go back down to users, and I can do this by using 2 dots, and that'll take me down. And then if I want to go back up to administrator, I can go to cd A, and then so Windows is kind of cool, and it has this function where you can just tab and it'll autocomplete the thing that like relates to that. So you can go back and we can see that we're in C, users, and administrator. Another cool thing is you can go down by like more than one. For example, you know how I did cd ... before? Let's say I'm in C users admin right now, but I want to go down to C and do this all in one command. So what I'm going to do is go to cd ... and as we know from before, that'll take me down to users. But now I want to go down to C, so we'll have to do ... again. So we can put a slash in between and put another ... and that should take you back down to C. So let's go back to cd and users, and I can talk about directory. So this function will list all of your files in this directory. So if I go back into administrator, you can see all the files listed under directory. Another cool thing is make directory. So if I go into my documents folder, just where I stored my documents, I can make a new directory. So let's say I want to make a directory called Cyber Patriot Test, so like CP test. If I go back into my directory to list out all the directories, you can see right here, CP test is right there. Another function is the rename function. So you can rename files to whatever you want. So we can see here that I have a file named file1.txt. Let's say that stores like my schedule for the day or something, and we want a more specific name. So what I would do is I would type in REN, the current file name, and what I want to rename it to. So let's say like task.txt. And then that, we can pull it up again and we can see that file got renamed to task.txt. So there are a couple other cool functions that we can use like that. So now let's say, okay, I'm done with my schedule for the day. Let's delete the file. We can use the delete function, which is del and fast.txt, the name of the file that we want to delete. We go back and list our files. We can see that file is gone. So as we can see, our screen filled up a lot with random commands, and it's a little cluttered. So if I want to clear my screen and get rid of everything from before, I can type in this command, which is CLS, and it's basically the command to clear your screen. So as you can see, you can't go up or down, or you can't go up anymore. So it clears everything. And the last thing I want to show you guys is that you can also use CMD to launch an application. So I know that MS Paint, its application name is mspaint.exe. So if I just type this in and I press enter, MS Paint shows up. So if you have like a file you want to access, but you don't know the exact location or something like that, you can always use this to bring it up and see what's going on. And lastly, we know that there are a lot of commands. So if you get confused or just want a reference, you type in the help command. That'll show you all the commands, what they mean, and so on. Next, let's go on to remote desktop. So remote desktop is a feature where all the users can connect to their PC remotely. So unless otherwise specified, always make sure to turn this off because you don't want like random people or like devices connecting to your device, like your network without permission. So you can find this place by going into settings. Into settings, and you can search up services, and that should pop up. And then you can scroll down to, it's alphabetical order, so just scroll down to remote element of PQR. Okay, and then you can see these are your 3 remote desktop settings. And you can see it right now, they're all like running and manual. So if you want to turn them off, what you can do is right click it, click properties, and then you can change your startup type to disabled. And then you can save your settings and apply your settings and go on. There's also another way to access there are also some other remote desktop settings. So if you go to your system and security and control panel, so security, system, and then advanced system settings, you can go to the remote tab, and you should see more remote desktop settings. And it's on don't allow, which is good. So that is what you want. And also something I forgot to mention earlier with command prompt, when you're opening command prompt, make sure you open it as an administrator because you get like advanced permissions. So if I go into here and I type in command prompt, if I right click it, you see how it says run as administrator. You would click on that, and that's how you run your command prompt as an admin. So back to remote desktop. The reason you want to disable remote desktop is because CyberPatriot is a competition about security and securing networks, right? And because remote desktop allows people to access your PC's file systems from outside your network, it can be very dangerous and you want to disable it. So last topic of the day, let's go on to NetShares. So NetShares are used to manage your shared resources. They can create, delete, modify, or display shared resources. This command is used to make a resource available to clients. So there are several ways to display NetShares on your device. But I would recommend using the command prompt because this is one of the only ways to display hidden shares. So if I go back into my command prompt and I type in NetShare, that was very wrong spelling. You can see it lists all of the NetShares you have. So you can see it has the name, so IPC admin, and then their locations and any remarks about them that might be important. Another way to access this is by going into the run command I mentioned earlier, which is Windows plus R, and typing in this command. So this will do something similar, but it'll bring it up in like a GUI fashion. So you can see if you go into System Tools and Shared Folders and go into Shares, you can see the same three things you saw earlier. Their name, folder path, type, and so on, description. Instead of remark, it's called description. So that is how you can view your shares. So that concludes today's lecture about Intro to Windows. But if I remember correctly, we didn't just talk about bringing up a virtual machine for Windows. We didn't demonstrate it. So what I want to do is demonstrate how to do that. But before we go on to that, does anyone have any questions about the lecture? If not, I can go on to virtual machine setup. Let me bring that up. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here I pulled up my VMware workstation. If you guys don't already have this, you can go onto the Cyber Patriot website, and I believe there is a download link there. So to create a virtual machine, what you want to do is click Create a New Virtual Machine, and make sure you click the option where you say Install an operating system later. I've tried using the installer disk image file multiple times, which directly attaches your ISO at the beginning, and it has not worked ever. So make sure you go to the third setting. So right now I have the ISO for the Windows Server pulled up. So click on Windows and whichever version of Windows that you want to install. And then we'll go to Next. This is just the name of your virtual machine. I'll just name it Cyber Patriot Demo Location. You can change that if you would like. I'm just going to stick with all the defaults. Go on. That will show you a preview and then finish. So with this, you should give it a second. It'll pop up on the left. And then here's your VM. But you can't quite use it yet. You still have to put in your ISO file. So once you click on Settings, you go into CD, DVD, and then click Use ISO Image File. And then I think this is my file. Choose whichever one yours is, and click OK. And then you can play your virtual machine, and it'll bring up all the settings that are required with this. So let me go in. If you give it a second, it'll boot up. I can show that too. This ends up loading. But essentially from here, just follow all the setup information, the directions. It'll tell you what to do. You want to boot from your ISO. And then there will be an option. If you use the download link that I have, which I can provide later, there are going to be options for like standard evaluation, standard version, or desktop version. Make sure you click the desktop version, because that'll give you like the entire GUI and everything instead of just like a command prompt where you just type in commands, because that's not really useful. Well, I mean, I guess it is, but you want to practice with the GUI, and then you'll put in your password and everything. One problem for me was that once I made created my VM. Actually, I talk about that later. So right now, where's my mouse? I'll go in and I'll click enter and it'll boot up. To boot up from my CD, DVD. Let me see if I can expand this. So one problem with my VM before I changed the setting was that even if I expanded it, like the entire screen would expand, but the actual VM itself would not scale up. So there is a setting that you have to change once your VM boots up to let you do this. Okay, so it's a little bit small, but this is just goes through your normal setup and then installation. So this takes a little bit, so I don't know. We might have time to go through the entire thing, so I'll just let it run. But so yeah, don't be worried if your VM doesn't automatically scale up when you full screen it. Just make sure you change the setting, which I can go into later. I'm gonna accept the license and move on. And then make sure you custom install as well. And you can keep all the defaults, go on. And then this takes a little bit to run. But essentially this is just setting up your installation and making sure everything is working fine. And if you guys aren't already, and you don't have a VM set up for Windows, you can do the same process. So if you run into errors, you can just ask me and it'll be easier to help you out right now.
Can we find it on the website? Like I went to Microsoft and I can't find it.
So the ISO that I'm using right now, Ryan actually gave me the link. Ryan, if you can drop it in the chat if you haven't yet. But
I posted it earlier in the chat.
Okay. So if you use that ISO, everything should be the same as what I'm doing right now. I think when you use the link, it'll tell you to put in some like your name and information about your stuff. So it doesn't actually require, like if you put in your name and everything, at the end it'll say download the ISO and it'll download, and then you can go on from there. Yeah, so this takes a bit. So if any of you guys have other questions, just let me know. I'm not sure if we can get to this actually loading by the end of the block. So I can talk about the way to fix your full screen thing right now. So at the top, you should have a bunch of options. I can't remember off the top of my head which one, but if you click on one of them, there should be a drop-down that says Install VMware Tools. So if you click on that, and then you click, I believe, the very top option, it should be the default option. It'll install VMware Tools, and then I think it automatically restarts the VM. And once that restarts, you should be able to have a nice working full screen VM. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'll let you guys know if anything happens to it. But that's it for today's lecture.